Okay.
Oh no, I lost my notes. Sorry. Oh, whoops. Here they are. Okay. Hi, everybody. I would like to call the Policy Committee of the Portland Board of Public Education to order. It is Monday, March 9th at 6:04 p.m. We're meeting in an online format. My name is Maya Lena, and I'm the chair of the Policy Committee. Tonight we have with us Vice Chair of the Board and District 1 Representative Mickey Bondo, at-large Representative Yusra Ali. We also have joining us Chair Lentz, and we also have Chief of Strategy and Operations, Dr. Sarah Warren. And joining us tonight as well is, if you'd like to introduce your full name, Kathleen. Oh, I see your name. Kathleen Wade from our lawyers, Drummond and Woodsum. Thank you for being here, Kathleen. Tonight we have a pretty busy agenda. We are going to go over policy ECC, which is the temperature standards. We talked about this a few meetings ago, and we're hoping to vote to pass this on to the board. We are also going to be looking at policy BEDH. This was voted to come back to the board for some review and possible revisions. Policy GBEB, which is staff conduct with students. And oh, I forgot to say with policy BEDH, that's public participation at board meetings, and we are hoping to review that and vote on it as well tonight if we are able. And then Dr. Warren is also going to update us on a couple of the other policies we've discussed at this committee, which is IHBB for gifted students, and then IIB, which is the class size policy. Before we do any of that, I'd like to see if there's any public comment. I don't have any attendees, so I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. And Dr. Warren, go ahead.
Great. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. So the first thing I'll do is just project a slide deck here. Let's see. Okay. Can folks see the slides okay? So as the chair noted, we're going to start with the temperature standards, move on to BEDH, have some discussion of the staff conduct with students policy, and then an update on other policies. There has been a discussion or some questions raised around EAD, and Chair Lena, I don't know if you want to get into this here or hold this for tomorrow night.
I was going to
But I
hold
was
that
going to
for tomorrow night since the calendar's
Okay.
moved away from the committee.
Great. And then, so let me
Sorry,
just
I have a quick
dive in
question.
and say a little bit of, yep.
Yes, board member. Ali.
Lena, what do you mean the calendar has moved away from the, do you mean since the board voted, um, it would be with the full board now to discuss any changes?
Yeah, so our
Okay,
committee
okay.
voted on the calendar to approve it to send it to the board. So since it's no longer in the committee, it's now to the
Mm,
board and it's on the agenda for tomorrow night at the board meeting.
okay.
And actually, the question that's been raised is about really implementation of this year's calendar as well. Yeah. But we can do that in that space as needed. Okay, so policy ECC again is one that this committee has already looked at, and there were some questions raised about how this applied to vehicles, so buses and vans, the outdoors, students going out for recess and other activities. And so we have gone ahead and added some language in there to incorporate vehicles as well as adding the language around outside and what to do in those situations. I will note that we are getting some support from our partners and attorneys at Drummond Woodsum to help us build out the detailed procedures that go with this. We have some of our own already, but with the expansion into these other areas, such as outside and cold, actually, the ones that we had developed were really for the summertime. They'll be helping us build out the standards that go alongside this. So assuming that the committee moves this forward, we will continue to work on that to get that done. So let me just for a moment share the actual document. Sorry, I have to change my orientation every time I go from Google to Zoom. Can you see the policy now? Great. Okay. So what you'll see here is a change in the title to reflect the broader nature of the policy, as well as clarification. So dividing the standards into an A and a B, with the A applying to classroom and other indoor spaces, as well as vehicles. And essentially from a policy perspective, the rules for vehicles would be very similar to what they are for, or the same as what they are for inside the buildings. And then there's a new section B that talks about outdoor. And the numbers here are taken from the American Association of Pediatricians, because you've got to pick a standard of some kind, and they seem to have looked at this quite in depth. And so we've gone with feels like temperature. In the case of cold weather, that means the wind chill factor is taken into account. And in the case of hot weather, the heat index and humidity would be taken into account. So the limits we put here were really when people should be kept inside, with an understanding that no matter what, as it gets colder or hotter, staff should be working with students to make sure that they are appropriately prepared to be outside, or maybe even that they would want to shorten the duration of outdoor activities as the temperatures start to get more extreme. But these are the cutoffs where we would bring people inside definitively. So, and then the rest of it has not changed. So those are the key changes.
Does anyone have any thoughts or questions about the updates that Dr. Warren shared? And I also wanted to acknowledge that board member Ali Ellie has joined us. So thank you. Yes, Vice Chair Bondo.
Yes, I just have a clarification question on those outdoor activities. Those are included also the recess or not? Or just like a sport, or because sometimes, kids has to be in recess, so is everything included there or just separate?
Right. So it was, intended to be recess, or sometimes, the phys ed class will go out, but other classes sometimes go out and do outdoor activities as well. So it was intended to apply in all of those situations.
So I have a concern about the new proposed outdoor minimum temperature. As an elementary parent, we had a week of cold temperatures in the beginning of the winter in January. And our kids didn't go outside at all. And there were days that it felt perfectly fine for the kids to have gone outside, and instead they were kept inside all day long. And I know that the current practice is the wind chill or the actual temperature being 13. And I just am wondering if there's been any. I know we're going with the American Academy of Pediatrics, but there are plenty of Nordic countries that do send their children out in much cooler temperatures. And I know there was a clamoring of families that really wish their kids could have gone outside that week. So I'm hesitant to support the 15-degree minimum because it seems more strict than what we have. And I'm curious if any board members have any other thoughts on that as well.
I'm not sure, Charlene. It sounds like I'm not sure where the 13 came from. I get that may be a school-based practice, I'm not sure. But I could say that in looking at the association's standards, I took the 15 both because that's what our pre-K, one of our sort of pre-K leaders told me they had been using as their cutoff, but also that's the sort of bottom of the. It's like after that it starts getting uncomfortable and unpleasant. But there was a lower range where if you go down to 9, feels like 9 degrees, then it gets into the dangerous range. So that's another potential cutoff. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Chair Lance.
Thank you. Chair Lance, go ahead.
No, that was fine. Yeah, I've always been interested. I don't think Ocean Ave has a consistent temperature that they use, or maybe they do, but we've had very different experiences. And I also land on the side that I'm just like, if everybody can be just appropriately, please get outside. So I would be interested to see if there's anything lower that we could do, but also in my experience working in young adult or early childhood, 15 was always what we used. It felt like the standard number. Um, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I think for me, without having had time to sit with this and really like think about the low end of the outdoor temperature. I mean, there's so much of a push for kids to have the appropriate clothing that in my experience that and that the school does a really great job of outfitting the children as well that don't have it, that don't bring it. That I feel like there might be a way to go a bit lower, but I do understand the reasons that you're giving, Dr. Warren. So I personally don't feel comfortable moving this along. I don't know if anyone else wants to share their feelings about that, but that's something that I'd like to spend more time with. Yes, Yusra Ali.
How would we ensure that kids who are not able to be appropriately dressed will be dressed? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I can try to answer. I mean, just from my own experience as being a parent in Portland Public Schools, the schools have an abundance, or at least the school my kids are at have an abundance of supply of gear, and we get reminders all the time as parents. And I know that not everyone can acquire the necessary gear, but there are organizations that donate gear to the schools to make sure that the kids have what they need. So that's been my personal experience. I don't know if anyone else wants to share, Dr. Warren or anyone.
Yeah, I think they often have sort of closets full of extra gear on hand, or try to help get winter coats and things for families who need added support in that. I also think that no matter what we set the temperature at, that could be part of the procedures, at least that there's an expectation. That we as a district and as individual schools are making sure that there are things on hand to support students who either in general or on a given day don't have enough to be safe and comfortable outside.
Yes, Vice Chair Bondo.
Yes, thank you. I just wonder about which how we been doing before to come to those changes, and those are the changes required by the state, or just the way or everything went to any school leaders or teacher discussions. I just wonder, because if we want to come back and have a little more time, so I just wondering what we have done, what are we doing right now when we have this kind of temperature. So what kind of decision, who's making those decisions? Those are to the teachers level. So I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I think that's kind of one of the problems is the lack of consistency. So the state passed a law that required us to put temperature standards in place for buildings specifically. And we've got Kathleen on here, so she could also speak to that. Is she still here? So that's a requirement that we had to put a policy in place. What's been happening so far in my experience here now, my experience is, I'm only in the 3rd school year now, and, this is not something that I necessarily am an expert on. So, but what I have observed, certainly this winter, is schools sort of making some independent decisions about what was appropriate. And so not consistency there. We did make a big push over the last 2 summers to try to establish some common procedures and expectations with regard to heat. Because with climate change, frankly, it's been getting more extreme, and we were realizing we've had some very hot days and very humid days, and we still run summer programming. Our schools are not generally air conditioned on the whole, and our buses are not air conditioned, and we've got students traveling to out of district programs. So we've been doing our best to figure out how to sort of set appropriate limits and keep folks safe and relatively functional in the heat. And that sits at the procedure level. It's not policy, and we really don't, as far as I know, have anything that relates to the cold.
All right, I understand that, Dr. Ryan. So if we have the procedure standard for all the building for the school, I'm mostly concerned with the elementary schools. So, and then we have a procedure standards who can aligning to the policy, but we leave open to the school leaders to make a decision, because different school, they have their own ways to define temperature and to feel like, okay, kids, they need to be outside, later on, because I know them keeping them too long inside of the class and don't go outside. So if we can leave some open space here, so he can have their own decision making to the level, but they have the standard procedure aligning to the policy for all the schools. So I don't know if that's making sense, if you understand what I want to say, because they are, like you say, is not consistent. They are making on a different capacity and different level of decision. But the thing is, if we have a procedure for all of them to follow, but the decision making is just up to each of school leaders to make it and to decide if it's
I mean,
good
one
for.
thing that is true, yeah, one thing that's true is that there has to be some degree of flexibility and variability, because it can be several degrees warmer or colder in North
Yes,
Deering at the same time that it's a completely different temperature on the peninsula.
exactly.
And so, and things shift through the day, and one school may have recess, an hour or more before another school, and so we have to allow sites to manage from where they are. But I do think that we need, based on what I'm hearing you all saying, maybe it would be helpful if we added some language in here that emphasized the importance of outdoor time, and trying to prioritize that while staying within these bounds. And maybe, the committee would like to adjust where the limits are. Maybe we go down to 9 because 9 is the sort of edge of the dangerous zone. I don't know. But this is not set in stone. We can amend this according to what the committee and the board feels appropriate.
Right. I just want to excuse myself. I'm going to turn off my camera because I've been coughing and it's not looking good.
Oh.
Me doing those gestures on the phone. So sorry.
No, feel better.
Carolyn, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say I did a little bit of Googling around Minnesota, because I often look to Minnesota to see what's happening there, because we have similar ecosystems sometimes. And they use actually 0 or -15 wind chill. So I think it would be interesting to pull some more data points to see what's out there. And the other thing I would just say is that I would caution us against decision making below the principal level, just because I know what happens right now is that hardier teachers and the teachers that really like to be outside take their kids outside even when it's colder, and other teachers don't. I think there's a lot of individual decision making happening, so I would love to see a more consistent level of those decisions being made.
Yeah, I'd also like to second seeing more data points before making a decision. I think that would help me a lot. Just so that we're making an informed choice that makes sense for our climate and the reality of how many days in a row we can go without the kids getting the movement that they need in the middle of the day. So, um,
Great. We can work on that and come back for the next meeting. I'm just wondering, Kathleen, is there anything else you wanted to add from the sort of legal and state policy or requirements?
No, I think you covered it. It's tricky because obviously by law we're supposed to adopt a policy establishing the minimum standards for our buildings. But obviously, it makes sense to sort of give more guidance where you see fit to do so. So as long as it covers the minimum temperatures and maximum for school buildings, this policy will be good from a legal perspective.
Right. Thank you.
Hey, I just have to pray and stuff, but I have another question. Can I pray real quick and then ask? It's gonna be a lot of a follow-up question and everything. I just don't have much time. Okay. As in, y'all can continue.
I don't know if there's anything else about this policy right now, Dr. Warren, or just that we'll bring it back.
Yeah, I think we bring it back, and maybe for member Ali, we just have him share his questions or concerns, and we can factor that into the next edit and what we bring back to the committee.
That sounds great.
Okay. I'm just making a note to follow up with him. Okay. Great. So then moving on, the next policy is BEDH. So that's our public participation in board meetings policy. And this is one that the committee passed through to the board, and lots of things happened over a period of time between then and when the board looked at it, and the board decided to send it back here for some more discussion and review. And Chair Lentz has taken the lead in offering up some potential, well, actually a new version of it. So I'm gonna project that here and then turn it over to Chair Lentz to discuss.
Chair Lena, because I'm not officially part of the committee, I think it makes sense for you all to just vote on me presenting this to you as an option.
Oh, sure. Okay. I'd like to make a motion to have Board Chair Lentz present her recommendations for policy BEDH. Is there a second? Great. Thank you, Yusra Ali. And all those in favor, please raise your hand or your Zoom hand.
Thank you.
That passes. Yes. Thanks, Chair Lentz.
No problem. Just want to make sure we're on the up and up. So as Dr. Warren said, this policy is just something that I think several members of the board have been thinking about a lot. I know this committee put together some work on this, and then given kind of the public comment that we saw and just like some points of confusion that I feel like I have seen in being chair as the board, when I sat down with this to look at the current version, I ended up just making kind of a new clean version that is a logical order. And at the top, the biggest change you'll see at the beginning is naming the 3 different ways that you can give public comment. So at the top of the board business meeting, at the top of a committee meeting, and then on the voting item itself whenever it's listed in the agenda. So that does not guarantee that there is going to be public comment at emergency meetings or special meetings or any other type of board meetings. It just says that these are the 3 places where you will give public comment. Then it outlines the time limits and that you can't give away your time. And then an item that was flagged for committees and the business meeting was just the length of time for public comment. And again, the chair can always use their discretion to change these in the moment if needed, given the variables that are being presented. But that committee would have a time limit of 20 minutes, and that business meetings would have a time limit of 2 hours, given the given what's happening in those meetings. And then finally, I kind of took all the other things that were in this policy and put them into a bigger, longer list, as opposed to having some things in prose and some things in the bulleted list about kind of the standard rules of order around giving public comment. And I can walk through these, making sure that you're addressing the chair and that the chair recognizes the speaker. Speakers introduce themselves by name and town of residence. Something that was coming up a lot, and wait to move forward a little bit, Sarah, if you don't mind, if you can go back. One thing that was coming up, I was getting a lot of questions about people who are worried about giving their full address in public comment for their safety. And so this takes that, it was never actually written anywhere that we were doing that, but that was like the thing that had been passed down, but this gets rid of it and just allows people to say what city that they're from, which I think makes a lot of sense given the world these days. And that it just again says that, you know, public comment is to speak on school and education matters, except for personnel matters. And there has been questions about what that means, personnel matters, and that is anything about a specific employee or individual, and that is positive, negative, anything. It's just we don't talk about specific people in public comment. So that I think added some language there to make that clearer to folks. And then it says that there are other procedures for those items. Moving on to number 5, so you can scroll down a little bit, Dr. Warren. This is all the language that the committee went back and forth on that didn't get touched at all. That remained the same the way the committee landed on. I did add a note about no props or visual aids, handouts. I think that we've started to see sometimes those, when people bring them, get a little escalated, or can. It doesn't always happen, but I think just eliminating them is a good idea. Reinforcing that the board doesn't respond to any comments, and asking the audience not to applaud or have any disruptions. And again, more information on what to do if there is concerns about the superintendent or an individual. That the board chair will stop the public comment, and that the board chair can ask someone to leave or to stop if they don't. And then finally, just inviting people to email their comments if they're not able to come to a meeting, or if they feel like their comments are too long. I didn't in this last section say that all of those comments would be made available at the board meetings or anything like that, because they are public records, so someone could FOIA them if they wanted, but I didn't feel like it was right now anyway to add that onto a staff person to have to cull all of those and put them together to package them up. Felt like a little too much right now. So those are kind of the changes and the flow of this policy. We did talk to Kathleen about this in advance, and this version can stick the way that it is, but I'm happy to ask or answer any questions for folks if you have them.
I do have a question, and it's less about the content of your revisions or new version, Chair Lins. It's more just about procedurally. At the very top, you have the explanation of like, this is when you can give public comment. So I was wondering about that, and also the whole document, like as a whole. Is this something that really does need to be read out loud at the start of every meeting? Like, is that required that the chair of the committee or the board reads it out loud? And then also, like, if you are to read parts of it out loud, are you going to read about the 3 ways to give public comment? Like, I just am wondering about, one of the concerns is time, because sometimes public comment goes on for a really long time. And I'm just wondering if that's something that was considered at all in terms of how it's put forth to the public.
Yeah. So I started reading out the guidelines of public comment when we had lots of people that were not following the guidelines of public comment. They're always posted on Diligent Community along with that item, but it's not guaranteed that people read them. I think given the climate today, that I don't think we need to read out the three different types of public comment, but I think a lot of the other pieces will need to be read out.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have questions for Chair Lyons? We are hoping to vote on this tonight, so just keep that in mind.
I just want to say I was reading it and I feel like this policy was back and forth to us, and I really appreciate Chair Lance for the final policy the draft that I see here, and I will be in favor to move this forward. Thank you.
Chair Lena and Chair Lentz, I just want to raise a procedural concern question, because I think we're right around the iftar, the breaking of the fast, and so I know that we have members here who are needing to observe that and are observing that, and so I don't think we actually have quorum right now, probably, and I don't know what to do with that, but I just wanted to acknowledge that that may be the case.
I'm wondering if we could like plan to vote on this at 7 p.m. Would that be helpful? I'm not sure if that would be helpful to people. And just
Sorry, we've had the meetings while we are breaking our fast as well. I don't
Okay.
know. No, thank you for so much, Sarah.
I just didn't want to leave
No,
you
I
out.
agree. No, I agree. There's a few minutes left, but if Ali's still here, I'm okay voting on this specific item.
Yeah, as long as you have quorum to vote, you're good to go.
okay. Okay. I would like to make a motion to
Wait, guys.
Okay,
All right, I got my questions. Yes.
go ahead.
Yeah, no. So number one, sorry guys, that's man. Each individual. So my questions are on a little bit of the changes of how of number one, speaking about the superintendent, right? And any other complaints. Like, can you repeat that? Because like I'm at the end of the day, respectfully, like this is politics, right? And I do want people to concern their needs and issues if they do disagree with something or they agree with something. I understand when it comes to private investigations, we've discussed that, but I just want to make sure that this is they're still allowed to do that, like talk about the issues of what they see in policy or any decision making, so whatnot.
Yeah, so anybody can make a complaint, but it has to go through those procedures, not public comment. So if you, Dr. Warren, if you can scroll down a little bit, it speaks directly to that. I think it's number 8.
Directed to superintendent and other.
Because the board has the board has to uphold the employment rights of all of our employees.
Channel in a manner consistent with privacy, confidentiality, and due rights. Right. So 100% legally. And what if a situation like last time happens where they're incapable of doing it? We have to make sure that we have access to that channel at all times. And I think that should be like, I mean, it's already in policy, but that should be really, really deeply considered. But what that's only, and that comes in between when it comes to personnel issues. That doesn't consider if I have, hey, I don't think the superintendent is making a great decision with the timings of parent-teacher conferences, right? For example, and so that would be acceptable still.
Yes.
So it's only personnel direct issues that they cannot speak about publicly because of legal issues.
Correct.
Okay. If the language says that, okay. That's just good. I agree.
Like, Chair Lynch, can I just give an example? Like, if I were not a board member, I was a citizen coming to speak, I couldn't say, third grade teacher, Mr. Doe is the worst teacher that we've ever had, blah, blah, blah. I'm here to complain. Like, that's the kind of thing that cannot happen at a school board meeting.
Okay, right. I got it.
Okay.
Thank you. Works.
Okay, thanks so much. Okay, so I would like to make a motion to approve the policy BEDH that has been presented before us tonight to pass it on to the full board. Is there a second? Thank you, Yusra Ali. Okay.
One more question, sorry. Just real quick.
Hold on one second, Ali.
Okay. All right, sorry.
Are there any questions from the committee on the motion? Go ahead. Yes.
Number 7, the board will not respond to any comments given. Can that be amended just to say, unless like the chair responds or something like that? Like, because if it says that, and we do respond sometimes, we do answer questions later. But just at least saying the chair or co-chair can have the discretion in responding.
Okay, so the answer, Ali, to your question is yes, and I'm going to go through the procedures of the getting to the vote, and there's a part where an amendment can be introduced. So we're almost there. Okay, are there any other questions from the committee? Great.
What would a response look like? I understand where Ali's coming from. Would it be like, no, like for example, when I think his name is Tyler, came and was giving us information, is it a situation like that? Or because I know this is included because we do not want to go back and forth with someone who's giving public comments. So how do we specify that?
I think you would probably, like Ali recommended, putting something unless by discretion of the chair, and the chair would be the person to make that call given the situation.
Okay.
Vice Chair Bonda, did you have a question?
No. I'm about to say then, yes, I totally agree with Chair Lenz about the discussion of the chair to evaluate and to decide how to respond. Yes.
Okay, great. Is there any discussion on the motion? So this would be a place if anyone would like to give an amendment, you may make that suggestion now.
Yes, make a motion to amend number 7 to include, not word by word, but may except through the discretion of board/board chair.
Ali, you're cutting out. Ali, we totally lost you. Didn't hear what you were saying. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. So it's gonna say to amend. I'm gonna amend. And say, a possibility of an the discretion of the board or the board chair or the co-chair in case the board chair is not there. So that it can be responded. And on like questions, like if someone's saying invalid like things like, oh my God, that's just policy that passed and is really not true. And later on we need to address that. So things like that.
So Ali, I'll just read back what I believe Dr. Warren typed in since it looks like you're on your phone. So she wrote number 7, the board will not respond to any comments given and the audience is asked to do the same, including applause, comments, or disruptions, except at the discretion of the board chair.
Perfect. And if it's not board chair, then it's co-chair, like whoever's running it, because sometimes board chair. But anyways, that's it.
Can I actually suggest, because I just started typing at the end, but maybe the except at the discretion of the board chair should come immediately after the board will not respond to any comments given, because it sounds a little awkward to have it after the audience part.
I agree with you, and I think that maybe there could be 2 sentences after writing at the discretion of the board chair. Yeah, we'll give you a minute.
I didn't capture the part about the co-chair because I think there's essentially an acting chair. I don't know what we call them. If the chair is out.
Chair in lieu. I think, yeah,
I think it's implied because if the
Implied,
board
right?
chair isn't running it, they have to delegate someone. So that would be the person who is delegated, and that would just like hold true through all of our policies.
Okay. And were you proposing, Chair Lena, that we that we make this 2 sentences?
I think so, yeah, put a period after chair. And maybe like the audience is asked to refrain from responding, including.
Okay, I'm assuming this is all
Yeah, I think that makes
friendly
sense. I'll just
amendment
read it
territory.
out. Can I read it out loud again? The number seven, the board chair, excuse me, number seven, the board will not respond to any comments given except at the discretion of the board chair. The audience is asked to refrain from responding, including applause, comments, or disruptions. Great, we got a thumbs up, a couple thumbs up. Okay, great. Moving on. Okay, then by roll call vote, please indicate whether you are in favor of adopting policy, or excuse me, not adopting, moving policy BEDH as amended to the full board. Um, Board member Ali is a yes, I see that. Board member Yusra Ali,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bondo,
Yes.
and I'm a yes, so that motion passes. So we will be sending this policy BEDH to the full school board. Thank you, Chair Lentz, for your work on that, and thank you, Dr. Warren, as well, and everyone for your questions. That was very helpful.
Great, thank you. Okay, if it's all right, then we will move on to policy GBEB, which is staff conduct with students. Again, this is another one for different reasons, though, that went to the full board from this committee, and then the board asked it to come back to the committee again for further review and discussion. There were a number of emails sent to the board and some, I think some, if I recall right, it's a blur, some things during public comment, but just concerns raised. Some people had expressed concerns around the tone. Others had specific areas that they hoped would shift a little bit more. And so this has come back here. One of the things that Chair Lena and member Jane Sawtelle did some looking at other policies and found that the Falmouth policy might be preferable, and shared that with some folks. And there were some people who reacted positively to that one and thought that it had a more positive tone than the version that our committee had passed on. All of these policies in our area, including Falmouth's, are actually based on the Drummond-Woodsum model policy and have a lot of the same language in them. So Falmouth had made some changes to that to, fit them better. Portland, this committee had made some changes to ours. And so it wasn't totally clear to me in looking at it, what about the Falmouth one people liked or thought was better. I know tone was said, but I couldn't quite hear that myself in it, and I thought it might be helpful for the committee to see the two alongside each other. And so I've posted that online. I did some highlighting of things that were different or added by each group, and I think it's worth the committee considering whether you would like to adopt the Falmouth version or adopt some of the changes they made, or create an amalgamation and go ahead and vote on it, or you can instruct me and others to keep working on it as with your guidance and your parameters. And because we have the benefit of Kathleen on here as well, and she's familiar with more districts than I am. I don't know, Kathleen, if there's anything you would want to add about this particular policy.
No, this is another one where it's sort of there are not very many laws that sort of require you to do a particular thing here. And so our policy was developed with best practices in mind, but certainly every district, as Dr. Warren mentioned, has different preferences in terms of both tone and in terms of what's permitted and what's not. So I'm happy to answer questions as things come up, but generally I defer to you all on what you think is best for your staff.
So, Chairlina, is it okay if I walk through a little bit some of the differences between
Yeah,
the
I was
two?
going to ask you to do that. That's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
And sorry, I didn't realize our scanner didn't pick up color, so I had done these in different colors. And apologize for my chicken scratch. I do not have lovely teacher writing. So this is the one that this committee had worked on and passed through to the board. And I just highlighted a few of the things that were different here from the Falmouth one. And really in that first or second paragraph, you'll see that they chose some slightly different wording. We have and this committee spent quite a bit of time talking about this issue of the small nature of our community and just trying to clarify that we know, the board knows that there are a lot of connections and relationships across the community, and that making sure that this is not intended to ignore that or to pretend that those types of relationships don't exist. So being realistic about the fact that we're trying to set appropriate boundaries, but in some cases there just are closer and more personal relationships outside of work that aren't going away because of this policy. So that is not something that you'll see in the Falmouth policy. We both have this prohibited conduct section, and again, that just comes back to the model policy that we were all working from. In this second bullet point here, this language around friendship or personal attention, positive or negative, that was specifically added in by this committee, just to try to get a little bit clearer about what that means to be singling out a student, and that sometimes that might be not nice attention, but it could also be positive. And I think when we get to the Falmouth version, what you'll see is that they more explicitly call out grooming type behavior. And I think some of what this committee was doing was trying to call out some of the behavior that might be associated with grooming without actually saying grooming. And so that is one of the differences between the two policies that I think is worth, considering. Asking a student to keep a secret. This is, again, something, as I recall, that this committee added, and it's not added in the same way in Falmouth's policy, but it does sort of show up there in a different way. And then there was a long conversation in this committee about nicknames, because the model policy was sort of not positive about nicknames, but there was a recognition that here that sometimes nicknames are a thing in schools and with students and staff, but it was again trying to I think the committee was trying to get to a place where it wasn't about an individual student being treated differently or having a different kind of engagement with a staff member, that it should not be overly familiar. And then communicating with students on an application or account not sanctioned by Portland Public Schools. Again, this was specifically added and language crafted by this committee because there was a whole conversation around not communicating through personal devices, which is actually can get a little bit complicated. And really what we realized is that even if you happened to be using a personal device, as long as you were using a district sanctioned platform like Reach My Teach, we didn't name that in policy. We decided that could be left for procedure. But if there was a one or more district sanctioned platforms that were being used through a personal device, that would create a degree of protection and visibility that could maybe make the use of a personal device a little bit more acceptable. And then the section that's about checking with a supervisor in advance. There was this section on taking photographs, videos, or audio recordings for personal purposes other than any other purpose other than capturing images of school events or activities. This one kind of stood out to me as something that we had and kept, but is not, you won't see that in the Falmouth one. And then our committee here added human resources as one of the potential places to go with a concern. So not just the building administrator or the superintendent. So those were some of the key things here. And then we get into Falmouth. I thought it was interesting that they took this line about staff members are expected to be sensitive to the appearance of impropriety in their conduct with students. That was actually on page 3, and that came out of the model policy, but they moved it up to the first paragraph. Just kind of caught my attention. And this is under the prohibited conduct section. They had, I don't know why the highlight's not showing up here, but they had these examples of acceptable relationships that did not, and Kathleen, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not sure where they took this from, but I don't think this was in the model policy, and it was not something that we had in our version. So that's something that they, for whatever reason, chose to add. So examples of acceptable relationships include, there's language under the double print there, but not include but are not limited to coworkers in a secondary employment environment, familiar relationships between staff member and student who is a friend of staff member's child, and relationships between staff member and a student who is child of another staff member. And then this line about in either case, staff involvement should be limited to a direct connection to the student's school performance. My recollection is that we actually, on the Portland side, took that out, that the committee may have removed that. And again, I don't have the model policy right in front of me, so Kathleen, maybe I'm wrong, but I seem to recall there was a discussion within this committee about that our team is not only talking to students necessarily about school performance, there are other things that a student might want to talk with an adult about, and that the committee did not want to limit those types of conversations. And so I think that also stood out to me as a little bit of a difference. And then, as I noted, there's this paragraph here that specifies grooming behaviors. Some of it I think is a little bit repetitive, of things that were in other parts of the policy. But I have heard feedback from a couple of people that maybe we should have called out grooming specifically as a concept. And so that's I would say, one of the more significant differences. And then they dropped some of the language that we had around communications and family relationships. But they did not have, and this was certainly a significant point of discussion in this committee around being alone with students and out of public view. So that language is not in their version. And I know that was one of the things that we heard some frustration and complaint about, because people did not feel like that was realistic, even with some of the sort of flexibility that I think the committee had tried to add in. So that was another key thing. And they don't mention driving students at all, which is referred to in our version. And then this is where they took out the line that was about the appearance of impropriety and moved that up to the first paragraph, second paragraph, I think. And then they did not include the language that we had in ours around taking photos and videos for personal purposes. And that was about the end.
Thanks, Dr. Warren. I jotted down a couple questions. One is just a practical question as someone who I don't have children that are older and have phones and are going to after school events on their own. Is it reasonable to assume that a student at one of the Portland high schools has Reach My Teach on a personal cell phone, and that if they're at an event like a basketball game or a music concert, that if they need to connect with the staff person, that staff person also has it and it's like easy for them to connect? Or is that something that's not a typical practice?
So when we introduced the cell phone policy, this came up as an issue in particular around how could coaches connect. And I can certainly go and get an update on how this is going. At the time, the decision was made that we would make Reach My Teach available to all coaches and club activity leaders and whatnot, even if they were not a Portland Public Schools employee. I know that a lot of them had their own various platforms and things they were using to communicate with students, which I think raises some concerns. It does from my point of view. Makes me anxious to have lots of adults communicating with students on different types of platforms that are not school sanctioned. The student doesn't need to have Reach My Teach. They would need to be able to receive a text or an email, and they could respond to that. So the Reach My Teach lives on the
Yeah.
adult side, and
Okay.
then now I think it's a good question. I can certainly look into how that's working or what challenges may exist.
I'm just
at
thinking,
this
for
stage.
example, like student is running late to chorus district concert, needs to let their teacher know. How do they do that? That's really,
Mhm. I mean, they could certainly send an email through their school account.
yeah. But those are the kinds of like messages we're getting from staff about like, I do communicate with my students, but it's because we're trying to coordinate logistics and like that's, that kind of thing. So just to make sure that there is a easy way that those communications can still happen in a necessary way
Mhm.
and still be within the policy.
Yeah.
And then my other thing that I noted is that Falmouth has that section about age 21.
Thank you. Yes, I missed that when I was
Yeah,
going back through.
you
Thank
just
you for
scroll past
calling
it.
that. Yeah, I did.
Oh, wait, it's in
Because I think it was at the beginning as well.
It's right. Oh, yeah, there's one there.
Yeah, so it's in the second. Thank you. Yeah, not all of my marks are showing up here in this scanned version. I'm sorry.
And then there's one later at the very bottom.
Mhm. Here.
Yep. When I was reading it initially, I thought it was interesting, having known about, situations like this from a former place of employment where things have occurred with like, student graduated and then all of a sudden there's a relationship, it's like this creates a bit of a buffer from when the student is a student in Portland Public Schools and then a few years after.
Yeah.
So
I'm
I thought
wondering,
that was
Kathleen, would
interesting.
you be willing to speak to that one at all? Is that something that you've seen elsewhere? Is that something that would be both recommended and defensible from a legal perspective?
I would say I don't recall seeing it in another policy. It's not in our model policy, but the law changed a couple of years ago with respect to criminal activity, where folks who um, were former teachers who had a relationship with a then current public school student. So somebody couldn't essentially leave employment in order to form a sexual or intimate relationship with somebody who was still a student within the 12 months after having been their teacher. And I wonder if that encourage this. I've certainly seen on my side people be disciplined for similar relationships, whether or not they're in the policy. So I think it is totally appropriate if you wanted to add something like that. Also okay not to, and to still assume that somebody might look into that and could discipline somebody if they found something that suggested something inappropriate.
Okay.
Are there any other questions that board members or policy committee members have about this? Or thoughts on how we might move forward with policy GBEB? Yes, Vice Chair Bondo.
Yes, I just wondering about how many on the Falmouth languages are we going to adopt or adding to us going to reflect a balanced policy? Because I see some annotation on the side, so I'm just wondering, are we going to take some of those languages adding to our policy, or we have to make some change, or just the way it's just like a something then we brought as a reference? Because when I read it and I see is some of those pieces is aligning for what we have in our policy. So I'm just wondering how much are we going to get from here, or you are just something then we just refer, but we're moving to our own policy.
Yeah, so that was really a question for the committee. I provided this sort of annotated version, but again, I think I'm missing a few marks here that didn't show up in the scan. But just as a way for the committee to consider whether what you would like to do as a next step. So whether to adopt the Falmouth policy. Some people seem to feel that that was just a better one, and so it could be that we defer to that and adopt it, or it could be that this committee chooses to stay with the Portland version, but then bring in some elements of the Falmouth one, or that we keep looking and we continue to look at other options and engage in a longer sort of research and consultation process, broaden our net. So it's really up to the committee is the bottom line.
I think as the chair of the committee, what I find helpful is if committee members could share, you know, after hearing this review from Dr. Warren, like what parts of our policy might stick out to you as maybe not being worded correctly, or maybe we could remove this, or something that you saw in the Falmouth policy that you really liked. And then we could take, the time between the two meetings to meld them together and have a cleaned up version that really works well for Portland, but also would be clearer for staff, and that staff would be more supportive of. Yes, Yusra Ali.
Sorry, I'm just breaking my fast or walking around and stuff, but I really like how it lays out like grooming and grooming behaviors. I feel like it's more direct, and there's less of a gray area for, I don't know, interpretation. So I really am in favor of using the Falmouth version as kind of like an anchor and adjusting it to what we need and what the community and the staff specifically are comfortable with.
I agree. Mhm.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and I really do like where it says grooming. It's like actual terms that we're using instead of saying like, oh, just being alone with a student, or communicating, like, because these things are necessary. I really just want to be point blank on like what we're trying to actually stop, what we're trying to actually point out, like this is unacceptable type of behavior. So using the terms as it is, and as blatant as it is I think is the best way to do it. So
I just made a couple of notes. I mean, I think if it's okay with you, Dr. Warren, now that I really appreciate you doing them side by side and like showing what's different. That's really helpful to me. I am more than happy to work on revising. And then also, checking in with board member Sawtelle. She's been very helpful and getting this, revised in the next few days. And then have Dr. Warren look at it again. And then we'll have like a fully clean version to review at our next meeting. And also we can get legal, counsel to look at it one more time just to make sure everything is good. But I think it sounds like, I think we're all on the same page that we all believe this is an important policy and that we want it to be as clear as possible for staff and students and families to know what is expected and acceptable. And it protects staff, and gives them also the ability to point out things that if they're seeing that are not right. So, Dr. Warren, is there anything else that would be helpful from the committee beyond what I just said?
I guess one of the questions that has come up for me is just the question of tone. And are there things, because certainly from where I sit, relationships and community are foundational to teaching and learning. And I want to make sure that anyone reading this knows that. And, I think it's stated at the top. Let's see if I can go back. It is stated here. And yet it seems like when some people read it, that's not how it felt or what they took away. And so I'm just wondering, from the committee's point of view, is there more that we can and should be doing to strengthen, that positive sort of foundation that we know is what we're looking for, right? And in general, we're assuming and hoping that that's the vast majority of what we're seeing is the positive interactions. And I think this is meant to give some of those guardrails. So what are we missing, if anything, that we need to strengthen on that front?
Well, there's something that I remember came up a lot in the emails that we got from staff, and it's written in the Portland policy and also in the Falmouth one, which is that, you must review this with your principal in advance. And that was really something that staff were concerned would be impractical. But it does seem like it's something that's widely accepted. And I'm not sure if there is any other suggestion or just like, Dr. Warren, could you scroll to the Falmouth part about where it says that?
Yeah, and while I'm going there, I think I'm glad you raised that because there were conversations here within this committee too around, maybe certain positions should be called out. And maybe, you know, the nurse or the social worker or something where it's going to happen all the time. How is that different from, a one-off situation that somebody needs to talk with the principal about?
But yeah, it does say before engaging in the following activity, staff members will review the activity with their principal or supervisor as appropriate. And then it lists them there. And when board member Sawtelle and I showed this to our union partners, they didn't necessarily point that out as, I don't believe, as being a concern. So I just wonder if like maybe the flow of our policy was like, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. Oh, and by the way, so I'm not sure.
They're both framed the same way,
Okay.
and that's how the model policy is set up. So there's prohibited conduct. This is Falmouth. And then there's the things that you need to get prior sort of conversation with your supervisor about. So I don't know.
Ali, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think maybe what would be helpful is kind of defining grooming, and like some of the points of because I hear what you're saying by tone, like the tone, exploitation, victimization, intimidation, these different type of ways that people can maneuver, I guess, and trying to grasp all of the ways that grooming fits. Because if we say grooming itself, it's good, right? But then we have to start adding more to it, maybe using one definition and then explaining things that can relate as we were discussing right now.
Okay, I think there's a difference in the way the Falmouth and the Portland thing about talking to the supervisor in advance. The Portland one is like very much like you must do it in advance, but the Falmouth one at the end says as appropriate, so it's a bit softer. So I can work on that language when I'm doing the revising.
Yeah, I noted that. I wonder from a policy perspective if that's opening the door too much, because then what does that mean as appropriate?
Yep. Kathleen?
So I'm just looking at the model policy as well, and it looks to me like the model policy says that staff members are encouraged to discuss these things when they're unsure whether a particular activity may constitute a violation of this policy. And it does say the model policy also says that they are expected to review certain activities before engaging in them as well. It doesn't say as appropriate. It says before engaging in the following activities, staff members are expected to review the activity with their building administrator or supervisor. And just to give further context for the model policy, because I don't think I shared it in the beginning, it does predate my time with Drummond Woodsum, which means it's older than 9 years. So the context that I have learned is that there were issues in this area for a variety of folks, and that I believe Drummond Woodsum's model policy was actually developed with folks at the Maine Education Association at the time. So union folks had input on what was reasonable. So that's where the model policy at least came from, but certainly again, what works best for each community is slightly different.
Okay. No, that's helpful. And I mean, at a certain point, like we have to just do what's the right thing to do. Um, but I think we're on the road to getting to a final version. Ali, do you have a question?
Yeah. So how strong does it sound at the beginning? Like no tolerance, zero tolerance policies. You're going to be criminalized type of thing. Like how strong? Like you know what I'm saying? It gotta sound like point blank. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, it's an employment policy, right? Like if you violate the policy, then your job may be in jeopardy, right?
Forget about job, but what about criminalization? Like I think like I don't know. I don't know if we're allowed to do this, whatever. But I think it's really like these actions may be these actions are illegal in offense, whatever, and it may be taken into investigation, police, something like that, or criminalization or anything like that. Because once I just feel like the harsher it is, maybe.
It's in here in section C towards the bottom, disciplinary action and referrals to outside agencies. Staff violations of this policy shall result in disciplinary action up to and including termination. Violations involving sexual or other abuse will also result in referral to the Department of Health and Human Services,
Yeah, and law
maternity, law enforcement, blah blah blah. Yeah. So it's not in the beginning, it's at the end.
Okay, so criminal be okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Great. Okay, I have my homework on that one. And
Wonderful.
we have a little bit of time to just wrap up with those last couple policies that we were going to just touch base on.
Okay. So I'm going to kind of pass over the calendar. We're still working on constructing the 27-28 calendar, but trying to keep it as aligned to this year's, the one that you all just recently passed through to the board on 26-27. We're trying to sort of replicate that as close as we can for 27-28. And we'll bring that back. Should have it at the next meeting. And Chair Lena and I wanted to just come back on a couple of policies that this committee has spoken about previously, but we haven't looked at them for a little while. One is the policy on gifted students. And that is, as you may recall, a very brief and simple policy, and it essentially just aligns us to state law, which requires us to have policy and programming related to that, Chapter 104. We had a call on Friday. Chair Lena joined me with Jesse Applegate, and we were able to hear from one of my former colleagues down in Baltimore, who's really sort of led the way among the districts, and he is one of the people really championing this work across the country. And they've done I think, a very impressive job over the last several years of moving to universal screening and much more widespread differentiated learning for students to ensure that students who are identified as gifted or advanced get the opportunities and learning support that they need. So it was a very compelling presentation. We might want to see if we can get him to replicate it for a larger group of people. And then we also went back and we're looking at the Baltimore policy, which is quite lengthy and robust. And I've linked to that here in the slides as well. So I think it's clear to me that we as staff need to keep charging ahead and figuring out how we can get from where we are now to an approach that's much more like what Baltimore is doing with universal screening and a lot more opportunities and supports and differentiated materials. It is also the kind of thing that admittedly takes more staff capacity and more resources financially. And so it's not an overnight move, but it is something that I know I and we are committed to doing. And then the question becomes, what steps, if any, does the committee want to take at this point in terms of, adapting policy to recognize that?
I just wanted to add a couple things. It was really wonderful to be on that call, and what's so impressive about what they're doing in Baltimore is they're really capturing so many more students that qualify for the gifted and advanced learning. Right now, Portland really only services a tiny percentage of students, and they capture, like a sizable proportion of the students. I think it was over 25% of students are getting gifted and advanced learning. Is that right, Dr. Warren? Services
Yeah, I don't remember
at
the
some
total
level.
numbers, but it was, yeah,
It's
yeah.
sort of like, it's not like you're gifted and then there you go. It's like you show an interest and aptitude in this subject, and therefore we're going to support you where you are at your level. And it just seems like there's a much more it's much more tailored to individualized student needs in like just a broader way. And I know there was concern from some board members that, like working on gifted students really means you're just helping a few kids, but like, and that all of our students are gifted. And I think the way that they do it in Baltimore really does address that in such a great way. So I'm, as as a member of the policy committee and the chair, I would be more interested in taking more time to learn about how they're doing things there. Like Dr. Warren said, like direct staff to continue its efforts, and maybe next year we'll take up the policy. I don't think there's anything we can do right now that'll like make this happen if we do a wording change on the one we have right now. But I think there's energy to try to support as many kids as we can, as best as we can. And I think by doing universal screening, we can get there. So.
If I could just add one other thing to that, well, two actually. One is that I think Baltimore treats it as, and I would hope to see us treat it as an equity issue, because what we know is that when you leave the identification process too much up to staff referrals, we end up missing people and biases creep in. And that's why the universal screening is so important, because it gives a more objective way to approach, identification. And then the other thing that they did that I honestly had forgotten about, but is so important, is that they pushed really hard to start screening and screen all kindergartners and not wait. And what they found is when they started, they were starting with second or third grade. And the difference between screening kindergartners and screening a second grader was pretty dramatic. Because already by the second grade, some of what children bring in their own sort of raw gifts and creativity has been corralled so much by our system that by the second grade, some of them don't test as gifted in the way that they would have if we had gotten them in kindergarten. So I think it's not just doing it universally, but doing it universally from kindergarten. That would be, something that we need to be trying to work towards.
So yeah, we're not voting on anything with this tonight. It was more just like an update since we did have a couple meetings about it and then didn't really do anything with the policy. That's just where we are, that the work's continuing. But maybe it's not the policy committee's project at this time. If anyone has anything to add, we do have to wrap up really soon here because we have meetings coming up at 7:30. I know there was one other policy that we wanted to just update people on.
Yeah, this is class size is another one that both last year and this year the committee had talked about. And I don't think we have an answer yet. And my guess is that some of the answer lies in not just the class size itself, but in what kinds of supports we add. And there has been at least some effort to try to address that this year through the budgeting process and last year actually. So a proposal to add more ELA support, not just in kindergarten, which is what we're doing in the current school year, but trying to start increasing that in the first grade as well, first and second grades. And so that's one, sort of contained approach, but I think there's still a question mark as to what the committee and the board would like to do moving forward with the policy itself.
Yes, board member Ali.
Yeah, just a quick suggestion. If we've discussed a lot of policies, I don't know if we can push this to next week. I don't really think I have them. Yeah, that's all it is.
Yeah, and again, we thought sort of the same thing, that we just wanted to make sure that people knew that we hadn't forgot about it, that it's still something that is very much on our minds and we're working on it. But yes, we can have another quick update at the next meeting if that's helpful.
Yeah, and the header of the slide wasn't meant to say that the committee needs to figure it out tonight, just over time. That's, I think, the question that folks are wrestling with.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Warren, and to everyone. That was a lot, but I think we did a great job.
Yeah, thank you.
I would like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Is there a second? Yes, thank you, Board Member Ali. All in favor, please show your hands. Okay, the meeting is adjourned at 7:26 p.m. Please log into your next meeting as soon as you can. Thanks so much.
We'll log out of this one first. They need this
Yeah.
link.